when you talk about the intersection of health as well with the mobile industry, I find that one quite interesting. Have you seen anything recently that catches your attention in that area?
Just actually curious, what was that drink too much application? I think after this, I may go out, and some neighborhoods in Orlando.
Coming soon to the playbook.
I would dare say, sadly not enough, if I'm honest. Not enough innovation, I think, yet in the healthcare industry. That intersection of mobility and healthcare. Yeah. So, certainly there's lots of venture capital behind it, and there's lots of important important stuff going on. But in terms of things that really move the needle, I'm not sure that we've seen the best of what we're going to see just yet. But if you yeah, it's fair to say, though, that there are large, lots of large, powerful interests pushing that agenda forward, and I think and RIM is there as well. So.
Yeah, so it's certainly a classic example of something where the potential has yet to be realized, but I think everybody knows there's something there. Changing the topic now, one of the things that is a repeating theme, in fact, in both of your books, you talk about the environment for innovation. And one of the things that actually intrigues me is, and how much of that is also cultural. So one of the things I would like to ask you, John, is obviously the wireless industry is global, and there seems to be some key foci of innovation around the world. And it seems to be very different approaches between North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. What sort of things have you seen? Why do you think, is there a cultural thing or what that produces these dimensions?
This is a doctoral dissertation that I'm going to go write right after this panel presentation. So the short answer is that I think it's a complex combination of cultural, regulatory, economic factors, and of course what the industrial base looks like. But I talked a little bit before about how I can make an argument that the sort of wireless industry as a kind of traditional value chain ceased to exist in around 2007, and that the agenda has very, very much been sort of taken up by platform-centric companies whose market models look very much like two-sided networks, for any of you who sort of took Economics 201. Now, this idea of sort of two-sided network-based models, which I can fit Google in there, I can fit Facebook, Amazon, and lots of the rest of the sort of social networking or search-centric and/or content and physical product, transaction-based models that kind of characterize the service domain at this point. Lots of that innovation, lots of that agenda is now coming out of the U.S. West Coast, right, the Valley. I live in Boston. I effectively bi-coastally commute every week to the Valley, because that's where a lot of this agenda is being driven from. Which is not to say that it's not being similar initiatives aren't being driven from lots of other geos, but I think that tends to be the future of value extraction in this industry is going to happen on the basis of innovation, where you might regard the mobile network as kind of a means to an end for the logical extension of these business models. Now, having said that, was my very, very parochial North American answer, right? So I was, and if our survey data shows, and lots of our competitors' survey data will show that in any given region, for example, if you look at social networks, for example, on a region-by-region basis, you would be forgiven for opening the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times and thinking that Facebook and Twitter sort of ruled the world. Not so at all, right? You need to, if you're thinking about engaging in any of these markets and social networks are on your strategic agenda, whether for CRM purposes, marketing, PR, or you just want to be involved in social networks, you need to think about the local presence, right? So whether it's RenRen or vContact in Russia or Hives in the Netherlands, right? So these are very, very meaningful local presences that and bastions of innovation. I think that we. That we can't overlook. I was asked yesterday after I gave a presentation on social networks by a technology company, by some folks from Australia and Singapore, why I thought that the pace of enterprise adoption of mobile social networking and other mobile applications was relatively slower in the greater APAC region than it seemed to be in North America. And what sprung to my mind was RIM is less present there, right? Their market share and their presence in all of Asia there's not as much of a target to aim at, right? And so here, we have everybody who does, all the OEMs who have Android agendas, are feverishly working on enterprise-class solutions or enterprise-centric solutions to knock RIM off the block. So, multiple factors, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But certainly, if I had to characterize it in a broad stroke, I would say that internet-centric models are driving much of the agenda here, and much of that happens to be located here in the U.S.
Another thing you need to think about, I think that's important, in addition to that, all of which I agree with, is when we think about regions of innovation. I mean, people have been saying North America, particularly U.S. innovation, was in serious threat and maybe had peaked since the mid-'70s, right? And yet that never quite seems to happen, right? And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that you both need an entrepreneurial culture and you need venture capital and all that stuff, but you also need, in a sense, innovation-friendly consumers. It's a great asset to be in a culture where people are just willing to try things out as consumers and to put them to new uses and say, well, I don't know what Twitter is, but I'll try it. And when you have that in a culture, which for some reason we have in North America for sure, that just makes it a lot easier to come up with good ideas and get them in circulation because people are willing to try them out.
I'm wondering, do you think the media plays a role in this?
Yeah, I think it's one of the few areas where the media is actually excited to talk about change in a positive, enthusiastic way. Normally the news slants towards kind of bad news, if it bleeds, it leads. But technology change is the one place where you really will see the news media kind of be an unabashed booster. And I think that gets people more excited about products.
If you wanted to be a bit cynical about it, then do you think you might say that the extent to which we here in the U.S. have a media apparatus that's maybe a bit more concerned about reporting on things either bad news or trivial matters, kind of helps the cause?
Yeah, and I think if I had a correction for the media, it would be I would like them to talk a little bit more about positive, progressive developments in the social world that aren't just technology or aren't just Wall Street.
I totally agree. Any observations, Tom?
Well, just, your original question was about centers of innovation around the world, and I live in the Silicon Valley, and it would suit my interest to say, oh yeah, it's all happening there. But we see it happening everywhere in the world. I'm a big believer. I spend a lot of time in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I think it's a hotbed. I noticed one of my clients, GE, is going to make big investments in Sao Paulo. I visit Singapore a lot, and it's a country run like a company. I mean, it's more dedicated to innovation than I think any country in the world.
Yeah.
Right, and people don't talk as much about Japan as they did in the 1980s, but if you visit the robotics center in Osaka, you think, wow, there is stuff happening here. Yeah. The thing that I notice in some places in the world, we think when you're bringing out something new to the world, you got to get these three things right. There's the technology factors, which of course we all know. There's the business factors, also kind of obvious, but there's this third circle, it's the human factors. And what I've noticed in some of the technology centers in the world, they tend to not pay maybe quite as much attention to the human factors. Whereas we believe, in fact, it's this process we call design thinking, that if you start with the human factors, then your technology is more likely to be embraced when you do bring it to market.
Yeah.
Well, you think about Silicon Valley, people always talk about that particular hub being all about the confluence of, kind of venture capital, some early influential entrepreneurs, and great academic universities. But the counterculture in the Bay Area is a big part. If you look at the old pictures of the Homebrew Computing Club, I mean, it's like a Grateful Dead show, right? Everybody is, really long hair and huge beards. And it was, in fact, that cultural element of being kind of outside the dominant culture and trying to think of radical alternatives to that culture that gave people the opening or the kind of opportunity to start thinking differently about where this new technology could take them. So you can't just look at where are the academic institutions and where's the money. It's also about that human cultural element.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that we found very, very interesting was the difference between, you refer to use of social networking. Actually, when you go out to Asia Pacific, and we saw it first intensely in Indonesia, it's a question of what is available, and then the people take it. So for instance, there wasn't easily widespread wireline PC internet access, but there was BlackBerry Messenger. And suddenly that becomes this whole parallel universe where people are actually consistently interacting at a level you wouldn't believe. For instance, in some countries, you know how in BBM and many other of the social networking, but specifically BBM, the adoption of your avatars. And some people are actually changing avatars 10, 15, 20 times a day. It's because it's there, and because it's always there, they're interacting all the time. All right, we'll veer wildly in another direction again. Historically, there is this notion of the inventor as the heroic individual that works through the night and has, these single inventions. And it seems interesting to me that you guys study this and find out that's actually not the case. Rarely do you have the single big think. Can you talk a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was ever true. It turns out that the story is easier to tell if you say Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, right? But even going back then, it wasn't Edison. It was Edison and this giant group of people in Menlo Park, right? In fact, at the time, there was somebody, when the news interviewed one of Edison's assistants, and he said, yes, Thomas Edison, that's a collective noun. He says, as in Edison invented the photograph. The phonograph, because this guy had worked, years on it himself. And so I think if you poke beneath the surface, and Stephen has poked beneath the surface quite a bit, I'll let him finish the answer, you'll find it was never quite so. And today, for sure, anything worth doing, anything that you can actually bring to market, is going to be a very large group effort. That, there's that photograph of Edison, like pondering his invention, the light bulb. That was for show, right? Innovation happens in groups. Period.
Well, I mean, just think about Edison and the phonograph. Edison was completely wrong about what the phonograph was going to be used for. He thought, it would be basically used for kind of dictating letters and things like that. I had no idea that music would become its kind of dominant purpose. It took other people taking his idea that he had, in fact, kind of collectively built in the first place, and then figuring out, it's actually good for these other things as well, and pushing it in these new directions that the original creator hadn't even really thought of.
So just to put a tail on that a little bit, when you think about innovation right now in the mobile domain, I have to say that I see a lot of what you might call aiming right at the duck. And what I mean by that, we think about these things that happen on the back of tremendous group efforts, right? So I have a pet theory that innovations that end up being megatrends, mass market phenomena, whatever you want, business model juggernauts, are very, they tend to materialize organically, obviously on the back of not an individual effort, but tremendous group effort, and are extremely hard to replicate. And the extent to which, I'll give you a kind of a short list of initiatives that I kind of think support this case. I'll list a couple of things. Ovi, Ping, MobileMe, Facebook Places, iBooks, Bing, maybe, until we heard some things about Bing yesterday that may change things pretty big. But I would argue that these are attempts at replication of innovation that has occurred and materialized organically. And I think history will probably prove that it's extraordinarily difficult to kind of bootstrap something that's already been invented, that's already caught fire, and either counter it or compete against it or displace it. And so I think when we think about because they're not here, I don't think Microsoft and Nokia are here, for example. But arguably Nokia had nowhere to go with this merger. But if you think about the combination of Microsoft's assets and Nokia's assets, and what they might do and what they may bring to market in 2 years' time, it's not dissimilar to what a lot of their competitors are offering today. And so to maybe point directly to aiming at the duck, I'm not sure that's a recipe for success. Yeah.
My suspicion is we could go on for hours. Unfortunately, we run out of time. But thank you so much, guys. It's been really interesting. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right.
That was great.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.